and welcome to the Bookyard. I'm Sam.
And I'm Kai.
Today is going to be the best time. Before we get started, I wanted to ask, how was your week?
Ooh, my week was pretty good. I am getting prepared because I have to go to school starting next week. So that's disgusting. But how was your week?
It was good.
You little liar.
Yeah, I've been a little sick this week, honestly. It has not been super fun here at my house. So if you hear me just coughing a little in the background,
Sniffling,
let me know. Or
Yummy.
actually, just don't. I'll try to edit as much out as I can, but it'll be good. It's a good episode.
It'll be amazing. I'm really excited.
Yeah. Not only are we going to talk about Bride today, which is a fantasy romance written by Hazelwood, but we are also going to introduce you to the second theory in our arsenal.
I can't wait.
It's so exciting.
Very scientific today.
In episode 2, we talked about the MMC breakup, and this week our theory is called the S&P Ratio, or in other words, the smut-to-plot ratio.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a cool background story with my ex today. Sorry, guys.
Sorry, buddies. I wish there were more of those.
I know. I wish I had dated more people and broken up with them.
To be fair, the smut-to-plot ratio probably wouldn't be your favorite thing to share on our podcast. Mostly because your mom will probably listen to this at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump into Bride. Kai, do you want to tell us a little bit about the book?
Absolutely. All right, so obviously this is a book podcast, and so there is going to be a lot of spoilers for Bride, so we highly recommend reading that first. But let me tell you a little blurb. This is actually from the book about what the book is about. So it says, in Bride by Hazelwood, Misery and Lo marry to create a political alliance in hopes of marking and ending years of violence between their species, vampires and werewolves, or wares. Misery's father is a councilman and the most influential person in their nest, while Lo is the alpha of his pack. Misery knows little about the wares apart from knowing that they are ruthless and fearsome killers, but she has her reasons for choosing to agree to this marriage and living among the wares.
I like it.
I feel like that pretty much summed it up. I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, it really did sum it up. There's not a ton more to the premise of the book.
No, I'm trying to remember how long this book is. Like 300, 400 pages?
It's not that long. Okay, we just checked. It is 410 pages.
It actually was way longer than I remember it being.
Yeah, I thought it was super short.
I did as well.
Let's talk a little bit about what we liked and what we disliked about the book. I thought before we did that, because we just read that blurb, I wanted to give a little bit of context. It's not like a high fantasy series. It's not taking place in like castles and medieval times. No one's wearing like cool corsets or anything like that.
Yeah.
Most of the characters are for sure in like jeans, and it's a modern day.
And they have like phones too.
Yeah.
And cars.
Cell
but like
phones,
bougie cars.
Cars. It's definitely modern fantasy setting, which
like,
makes the romance, I think, a little bit more accessible.
Yeah, it's kind of like adult Twilight.
Yeah, and it's definitely more romance than it is fantasy.
Ooh, I would agree with that, yeah.
That, I think, I don't mind it. It's different from what we normally read, but it wasn't one of my like loves or hates.
No, it was a nice trash book, which reminder, trash book is like potato chip book, just nice quick read to kind of get you going. And I feel like I finished it in like a day and a half.
Yeah, it was really fast.
So that was good. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what I liked. So I liked the MMC, Lo. I thought he was pretty cool and weirdly pretty sexy.
He was, actually. I was surprised.
Except there was one part that kind of gives me the ick. And that was when he was like as in his like werewolf form, and like they were just sitting in the closet and she was just like holding him as a dog. I don't know.
Yeah, he was like in his wolf state. And they like fall asleep and she's just like petting him.
She's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I was like, this is weird.
Honestly, it kind of reminds me of cuddle time with Chorizo, my dog.
Yeah, totally.
He is super cute, and every night I force him to sit near me on the couch and just pet him. So
yeah, and I got that vibe as well. I think I told you that. I think I said, I just imagine me sitting in the closet with your dog.
Yeah.
So I liked him other than that. I also really liked the smut for the most part.
Yay!
I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah. This was also, I think it was your first venture into like vampire werewolf territory. Talk about that for a second.
That was interesting. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but in general, it was It was something. This was, like you said, my first exposure to vampires and werewolves. I thought I was into it. There were little things where I was like, I don't get it. But that's just because I haven't ventured into that world before. But I thought it was all right. I don't know, what did you like about the book?
I liked quite a bit of it. When we talked about our tropes, I think I mentioned this, but I like forced marriage tropes.
Yeah, which is so strange. I don't.
I know. I think it's so interesting. I obviously in real life, I'm like, what? I would never be for that. I'd never be for like a forced marriage in real life, but honestly, I would do a lot for fantasy. So I liked that aspect of it. Okay. Honestly, they were both consenting adults, so I was like, cool, you do you. She decided to get married, so whatever. Yeah. I liked Lo. I thought he was fun. I liked his little sister. I didn't write that down here, but I thought his little sister was super cute. I thought that was a fun way to bring them together.
She was cute, actually.
And then I liked the sense of belonging that she found with them, like the Wares. I thought that was kind of cool because she obviously in the beginning, I mean, I guess it's not super obvious, but she didn't really fit in with her family.
Yeah.
Or like the other vampires. She was living apart from them.
Right. Like, her dad was a piece of shit. So.
Yeah. Another really, really bad dad in fiction here. But I do like that she ended up fitting in with them. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I agree.
And it was a fun, easy read.
I thought so as well. It was nice and easy.
I liked it. So those are my likes. Okay, before we jump into dislikes, sorry, I just remembered we probably should go over just a few of the characters' names just to give you a little bit of context.
Might be good.
We talked about in the blurb, Misery is the main character's name. She goes by Missy, I think, throughout the book.
Yeah.
Lo is the werewolf.
Yeah.
He's the alpha werewolf.
Yeah.
And then he has a little sister. Her name is Anna. Missy also has a best friend whose name is Serena.
Yes.
And then we have other like side characters who are kind of fun. Misery's dad is, again, stupid, terrible. Misery also has a brother who like kind of hangs out sometimes, but isn't like a huge part of the book until like the end. Yeah. And then there are a bunch of other werewolves that like we really just don't get into a ton.
Yeah. Okay, so with that little background, I want to talk about what I did not like about this book. I hated the whole Serena plot. It wasn't even like the beginning of the book. I felt like through the whole book, I was confused on if she was Misery's friend or her secret lesbian lover.
Yeah, you really got caught up on that. It was like you were really, really caught up on it.
It just was so weird. Like, I feel like she was just constantly talking about her, but not like a fun friend. Like, I don't know. It just got the vibe of like, is she your secret lesbian lover?
I didn't get the vibe that they were secret lesbian lovers, but I did definitely think that there was some codependency stuff going on because of Missy's like background with her family, where she just like didn't really have a relationship with any vampires, and Serena was the only one who knew that about her, like knew who she was. Right. And I think it definitely for me was more like, this is literally the only person who I have ever cared about in my entire life.
That's fair. I just never got into it. I never cared for Serena as a character.
I do think it's hard to separate that point from the book as a whole, because that is her whole reason for getting married.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that was a little rough.
It was awfully confusing. And we actually did a buddy read for this through Storygraph. And I think I commented at least 3 or 4 times being like, who is Serena? Is she her lover? Is she her caretaker? Who is she? And then you'd be like, she's just her friend. And I was like, I don't get it.
Yeah. Do you like friendship?
Nah.
Okay.
So I feel like that was my only main complaint. I don't know. Did you have complaints about this book?
I liked the amount of smut in the book. We talked about that a little. I just felt like I really hadn't realized that this was like a full-on like werewolf, almost like Omega-verse book. The whole like alpha, beta structure was very new to me, and I wasn't expecting it because we'd heard so many like raving reviews, and they were like, this is such like an accessible book. Everyone will love it. It's very like gothic romance vibes.
Yeah.
At this point, I think we were like hot off the tails of One Dark Window, and we were just like, yeah, we're going to go for it. Amazing vibes. Not the same vibes at all. And we kind of went into it because even the back of the book, it really doesn't like tell you what you're signing up for.
Not at all.
So I definitely was like, wow, this is so cute. And then I was like, wow, this is a lot of spice. It was not like exactly what I felt like I had signed up for, but I didn't hate it. I just was a little bit like, ooh, okay.
Yeah, well, going along with that Omegaverse thing, after we had finished it, Sam was telling me, yeah, Omegaverse. And I was like, what the hell is that? Would you mind explaining kind of what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the deal. In the last year or so, I've definitely been book Sam. So I've been online a lot, Instagram, Book Talk, all of the fun places.
Yeah.
You know, I have seen so many videos on Book Talk about romance and fantasy books that I think my algorithm kind of just led me into like deeper romance than I had prepared myself for, because I really wasn't like, I'm not an intense romance reader.
Yeah.
I'm definitely more of like general fiction. I love general fiction. I love fantasy. I love historical fiction. I love
sci-fi.
Most books. Yeah, sci-fi. I'm not like a strictly romance reader, but I think on Book Talk it's kind of hard to distinguish. So I definitely feel like I got led down that little phone algorithm hole, because sometimes I'd come across videos and I would be like, I do not understand what's happening here.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how I found out about the Omegaverse, right? And just to be clear, this is the only book that I've read that even veers like even a little into this. And I don't know that it actually counts as part of this greater like universe.
Yeah, we're very new to anything Omegaverse.
Planning to stay pretty new to that side of
For
this
sure.
niche right now.
For sure.
But basically what I found while we were writing this episode, we kind of like did some research into it, and we were a little bit like, oh, wow, okay, cool. Basically what we found is the Omegaverse is part of the fantasy genre, but more related to like erotic fiction. So very intense romance into like erotica. And it could honestly probably count it as its own genre, because it has a lot of specific rules. So Omegaverse fiction is, from what I can tell, based on wolf-like behaviors in humans. And it could also pertain to like werewolves, but mostly it's for humans.
Which is so crazy.
Yeah, this means that there is like a social hierarchy in books where this takes place. So there are alphas, betas, omegas, etc.
And I have to say that I'm not a hater with this specifically. I love to hate, but I'm just very new to this. So it's a little bit like I just giggle because I'm like, what is going on?
Absolutely. I don't feel like I'm a hater either. I think that if you enjoy it, I'm there for you. I'm glad you do. It's definitely just new for me, and I think it's helpful context for coming into this book.
For sure.
So each of these like groups has specific social and like sexual roles. I'm not going to explain a ton more because to be completely honest, neither Kai or I have really gotten into this. I don't feel like I plan to at this point.
No, I'm okay.
And I would like to say that Bride doesn't incorporate a ton of the Omegaverse rules, but it does include a few like key points and key features that were a little different, right?
Different is a very subtle word for this. I got so confused while reading this book, and let me just tell you, this is so vulnerable because I sound like an idiot.
This is a classic Kai moment.
This is so classic. I went back on this and I just can't even. That's all I can say. So obviously I also don't read a ton of romance. Romance and like Colleen Hoover is kind of what got me back into reading. But since then, I really don't pick up romance that often. I might pick one up quarterly. So pretty new, whatever. And in this, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the term knotting.
Yeah.
Knotting.
Knotting, like a knot.
Like a knot. And I don't even know what to say about this.
You were very confused. This is one of the specific characteristics that we were talking about that is incorporated from like Omegaverse rules into this book.
So obviously, like I said before, me and Sam had done a buddy read for this book because, fun. We liked doing buddy reads. And this is the first comment, 80% done with the book. I think this is the first time that they had sex together. And I say, okay, I think I'm just stupid. I do not understand why this knot is such a big deal. I've reread this and the last area where it was brought up for the first time, and I just don't get it. I don't know if I don't read enough smut or I don't have enough education on sex or what, but I am so confused because I'm sorry, I told it wrong. It was that she wanted to have sex with him and he kept telling her that he was going to hurt her or something. So that was like the main conflict, is that she wanted to sleep with him and he just kept being like, no, they're not. And I'm like, what is a knot? I didn't I didn't get it. So I finished the book. Genuinely, this is the last comment I made on our Buddy Reads. And I say, okay, after all of this, I still do not get the whole knot thing. It actually makes no sense to me. I just imagine him stuck in her and they're just walking around and I don't get it. Am I dumb? Like, do they fall asleep with him stuck? I just don't understand. And I just feel so embarrassed. But this is where Sam first came in with the Omegaverse. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about?
Honestly, it was great timing on the algorithms part because I had just like learned about this and then kind of been like, stay away from me. Probably like a month before that, I was just like, oh no. I kept like coming across random things about it and was just like, okay, yeah. But when you said that, I didn't think you were stupid. I thought, oh, this is a normal person who hasn't come in contact with things that she hasn't asked to come in contact with, right?
Yeah, well, and I also don't have dogs.
That's true. Quick, brief story here. When my parents got divorced, we moved to Idaho for 6 months, right?
Right.
I was like peak Utah County girl up until that point and was just like, yeah, obviously it's not like a giant city, right? But
right.
Like peak suburbs.
Yeah.
But we moved to like way out into the country. Shout out to like Parma, Idaho. It's
the country.
It's not my favorite place, but that's okay. And all of my cousins were like farm kids in Idaho. And I definitely had to like hang out with them a lot. And they would like toss around all of these like animal terms. They owned a ranch. So they like had all of these animals. And it was kind of like they were the cool people there.
Oh, geez.
And I was just like, yeah, I know what's going on. Right.
Right.
That's obviously how I found out about nodding, which is when like dogs have intercourse. They get stuck in each other.
Oh my
it's
gosh.
like biologically supposed to help like with procreation. So not like the coolest topic.
I just couldn't believe it. Like I finished the entire book and was still like, what is this?
Oh, absolutely.
Sam had to sit me down and talk about it.
It actually was at work that we had to talk about it because we were talking about this book at work. So like between people coming into the office, I would like scoot really close to you and be like, it's this.
and my jaw was to the floor.
To the floor. So honestly, if you are into that kind of stuff, this is the book for you.
This so is. That was too much for me. I don't know that this was for my cup of tea.
Yeah. I enjoyed it, but I was like, okay, I'm done.
I do have to say that we both really liked this book. We liked the plot, but Sam, for probably a couple of weeks, could not get over it. Like, she would just be like, that was so weird. The nodding specifically. You loved it except for that part.
Yeah, I definitely was like, wow, what a cool book. And then I was like, okay. So, it's totally fine.
It was. It just was interesting that like one specific detail was we just couldn't get over.
And we've actually talked about this a lot recently, where we talk about how as readers, there's a lot of things that we are willing to accept in fantasy books.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things that don't like break us out of the like, this is literature, this is fiction. Like you can tell me that someone like flew up to you with wings and I'm going to be like, yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll
cool. We're in fiction, whatever. But like the nodding thing definitely was probably the first time this year that I had been like, oh, wow, this is a book. Like it definitely broke the fiction like window for me. Like it definitely snapped me back to reality, probably faster than anything else would have.
Yeah.
But that brings us to the S&P ratio.
Yeah.
Which is our very cool theory.
Yes.
The smut-to-plot ratio is the second theory that we have made up in the last year. We had been reading a lot of different books with different spice levels, and we noticed that several Rachels from work were comfortable with very different levels of spice. Reminder, Rachels from work are literally everyone we know.
Everyone.
Not
everyone
even
and their
just
dog.
people from work.
No.
Most of the Rachels in our lives were at very different like spice levels. So like we had some people who were like, yes, I love spice. Like give me the spiciest thing in a book that you can and I'm there for it. And then we had other people who were like, I am not reading that. They were like intensely kissing and that's too much for me in a book.
Yeah, which is fine. Everybody's comfortable with different things, but it was something that we saw popping up a lot.
Yeah, we definitely, I feel like, had a little bit of a moment where we were like, okay, great. Everyone has their own comfort levels. This is very cool. We can kind of keep that in mind when we're recommending books, when we're talking to people about the literature we read. And that's kind of where this theory came from. We noticed that smut is often used as like a literary device instead of like building a plot.
For sure.
So as we were reading a lot of fantasy this year specifically, because romantasy is just such a huge thing lately. It's kind of taken over like the literature world, I think.
Yeah, especially with TikTok.
Yeah. And I think especially for women, which makes sense and that's totally fine. But we definitely realized as we were reading a bunch of these different books that a lot of the very spicy books, or even the like mostly spicy books, they don't have a strong plot to rely on. A lot of plot heavy books rely on very little spice. So let me give some examples. Sarah J. Maas had Throne of Glass, which was a huge book series. Everybody knows about it, had very little smut. It was fairly clean. And honestly, it fit the goal. It was really plot heavy. First of all, some of the books were YA.
Yep.
And second, it was a very plot heavy series. There was a lot to get done in those 7 books, which is why the last books were all like 1,000 pages long.
Right. Well, and I think it's important to add that although it didn't have spice, it still had elements of romance.
Absolutely. And there were a few like little parts later on in the series, but it really wasn't like a spicy series.
No, it was a lot of closed door.
And then Red Rising was also this way. It was it's sci-fi. You find this with a lot of sci-fi because there's a lot of plot to cram in.
Yes.
It was so plot heavy that spice wouldn't have added anything to the book, I don't think.
I would have liked to see some freaky Mustang, but yeah, I get it.
No, I absolutely would love some romance in it. I was just kind of like, oh, okay, makes sense.
Yeah, it just totally did not fit into that book. Kind of going along with that, Dune.
Yes.
We love Dune around here. You guys know that. And it has no spice, but it also has a lot of world building and plot to get through.
It does. It has genuinely more plot than could fit into the written Dune universe, which is crazy.
So crazy. And also like Divine Rivals. That one had a good amount of like closed door spice. I feel like it was a more even, like it had like some spice, but it wasn't.
I definitely thought it was more like clean romance.
Yeah.
And less like sexy time, you know?
And I think that I'm glad you pointed that out. Spice was not the right word. It had some fun romance elements with a little bit that gave you some butterflies, but for the most part, it was also plot.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. And Divine Rivals had quite a bit to get through.
Yeah.
As well, because it was a duology, and honestly, we loved it.
We did.
It was amazing. We'll come back to that here in a few episodes. But on the other hand, if we're going to contrast those two, A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas was way more spice than plot.
Totally.
Like, I think that's one of the biggest complaints that I hear about that book, apart from the people who just generally don't like Sarah J. Maas, and that's okay.
Yeah, or Nesta.
Yeah, apart from those two complaints, I think that's really the biggest complaint we hear about A Court of Silver Flames is that it is way more spice than plot. And the same goes with Bride. Even though it was really cute and I liked the book and the plot was very simplified because it was way more smut than plot in the second half specifically.
For sure. Well, and I think you kind of see that in the beginning when we're talking about the premise of the book, and both of us are kind of like, that was it.
Yeah, I mean, she set it up, I think, pretty well. I think Allie Hazelwood did a really good job at being like, this is the universe we're living in. This is what's happening. Let's get into it. And then she uses like smut to like way further along the plot.
For sure. So it definitely, there is a ratio though. But kind of going along with that, let me tell you a quick little story.
Ooh, I love it.
I was reading Bride at work, actually. It was one of those moments where, throw it back to when we read A Court of Silver Flames for the first time. Sam made a paper cover to cover the book so people would not know what she was reading, because we had Rachel's from work walking by and like giving us a little side eye.
People were looking over at my desk and being like, oh. And I was like, okay. So I literally just like folded up printer paper and was like, no one can know.
You made a really cute cover, actually.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was feeling like that with Bride because I'd heard it was super spicy. And I was probably 45% done, and Rachel walks up and she asks what I'm reading. And since I'm so far into this, there's been no spice. So I was like, I'm in the clear. I can tell her about this book. Because this specific Rachel, I don't think she minds. I don't really know. I can't really get a vibe.
She definitely is more geared toward YA series.
For sure. So I didn't really know how to feel, but I was feeling confident that this book wasn't spicy. So I show her and I'm like, I'm reading Bride, and I have to be honest with you, I really haven't gotten the spice element. Like I don't really know what people are talking about. I'm almost halfway done with the book. And she was pretty impressed. Oh, maybe I'll have to try reading it. And
I think you were like, I recommend it. Like you were like gung-ho about it too.
I was like, this is fun. So then I went to my lunch break and kept reading, and the nodding thing happened for the first time. And I was so embarrassed that I told her that there was no smut. I couldn't believe it. I finished the book and my first thought was, I have to talk to Rachel when I go back to work and tell her this is a sexy book. Because I was so scared that she was going to read it.
And then be traumatized?
Absolutely. So the next time I saw Rachel, I said, hey girl, I'm a liar. That had so much spice. Don't read it. Like that was crazy. I only said don't read it because I knew that she would literally hate that. If she was more into spice, I would recommend it to somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think either of us regret reading this one at all.
No, I don't. But I felt so embarrassed. I couldn't believe it.
I love it.
Most of Colleen Hoover's books also fit into this category of complete smut, zero plot.
Yeah, I do feel like it's very easy to like have a romance book fall into this more smut than plot ratio moment, because I feel like they use it as like almost like that is the plot, right?
Yeah.
And you get plot points like, and the girl was nervous to be in a relationship again, which, you know, isn't really a plot point most of the time.
Yeah. And then they just bang the other 50% of the book.
Right. And then she's over it because she's like, well, I'm in a relationship now, so we got over it. Yeah. So I definitely feel like everybody has an S&P ratio that works for them. And I think it depends based on like genre and also where you're at mentally. I think sometimes you go into it and you're like, I really need a potato chip book that's just like pretty spicy.
Yeah.
What do you feel like your ideal like S&P ratio ends up being most of the time?
I'm actually going to base this off of two of my favorite fantasy books because I like fantasy plus spice. I think that's kind of like my top comfort. Like if I had to...
So they're romantasy books, right?
Yeah. Like, I don't know though. Would you consider these...
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. They're like peak romantasy.
Perfect. Well, I would say, first of all, Fourth Wing. I feel like it has like a 2 to 3 smut to plot. Has a good amount of smut, but like also a good chunk of plot.
Right. Like it's not quite half the book is smut.
No.
But there is still some plot in there.
Yeah. And then I also like A Court of Mist and Fury. I feel like that's kind of a 1 to 2, if you would say.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there was a little bit of plot, mostly based on like her own relationship stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. I think that it definitely met the like S&P ratio that you're talking about.
So that's my, if you would, S&P G-spot.
Oh no.
I just pulled that one out.
You know, I liked it.
So what about you though?
I also like the ratio for Fourth Wing. I think it matched what I was expecting of Fourth Wing. Right? Like it wasn't a super like hardcore fantasy. It wasn't like high fantasy. Yeah. So I definitely was expecting it to be that way. I thought it was a great amount for the book.
Yes.
And I also love books that have no spice. Like, you know that I love Dune.
Yeah.
I mean, I love books. So I don't necessarily want to commit to one like smut to plot ratio because it does depend for me.
Yeah, especially where you are such a big mood reader.
Absolutely. I definitely am a mood reader. What I don't like is an S&P ratio of like 1 to 5. So like mostly plot, but with like one spicy scene in the middle. I think that if a book is going to have spice, it should be scattered throughout, not just like one spot, and especially the middle because it leaves such like a weird, unsatisfying like ending.
Yeah. Well, even with like the romance smut books, I feel like a lot of times it starts out where there's like a little conflict and then they start banging a lot and then the main conflict like brings them apart and then they like get back together and you never see that spice come back.
Like a resolution of spice.
Yeah.
That really does drive me crazy. I think that if a book is going to commit to having some kind of spice in it, they should distribute it pretty well throughout the book.
Yeah, and with a good scene, you know? That's what I came for.
Yeah. I mean, I like the build up to it, you know, more than like the actual like scenes. I'm definitely like a words of affirmation girl.
You so are.
You got to get me like in the room and then like the build up to the sex scene. That's the best part, right?
Yeah. Overall, I feel like Bride was a good representation to the intro of smut-to-plot. I think that's something that we'll probably use throughout, so I'm glad that we were able to talk about it. But I also would like to know your guys' smut-to-plot ratio. I think that everybody's is different, and I like that you mentioned the moods. I am not a huge mood reader, so if I had to pick like the perfect, I'm going like the 2 to 3 or 1 to 2. That's my spot, you know?
Yeah, and I definitely do think that it changes when you're a mood reader. Sometimes I want to read a book with absolutely zero smut. I just want like thoughts and fun like observations about life. And then other times I'm really just like, yeah, I really want to read like a fun romance book and I want it to have some spice in it. That's really cool. One other thing that I think that we can close out this episode with is that this really, I have noticed as we are reading more like female authors, I've noticed that men sometimes, specifically in sci-fi books, because I think the majority of the sci-fi books that we've read recently have been written by men.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think the S&P ratio depends on the genre as well. I think
That's
sci-fi typically has a pretty low S&P ratio. Obviously romance is going to be higher because that's the point of it.
Yeah.
General fiction, it really depends on what you're like looking at, but I feel like women really have been writing some incredibly varied books.
Yeah.
There is something for everyone. So if you like a lot of spice in books, we'd be happy to recommend some books for you. If you like not a lot of spice in books at all, you're still welcome here and we're still excited about it because we read a lot of those too.
Yeah, we also have some closed door if you like the build up but you don't want to know the actual ending.
Absolutely. We've read quite a lot of those.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I really like actually that you bring that up with this ratio is that there is something for everybody. It doesn't even depend on your comfort level, but just your general interests.
Yeah, and I do think that people tend to look down at women specifically who read books with smut in them. It really rubs me the wrong way because honestly, it's a preference and it's also not damaging. There are genre specific tropes that are important for every genre. I wouldn't look down on anyone for reading sci-fi because it has robots in it. I think that would be crazy. I mean, it's just an aspect of any genre.
Right.
So I definitely think that this S&P ratio is something we'll be returning to as we continue to read. And I think that it's something that every reader should kind of determine for themselves. And it can evolve too. I mean, maybe right now you're really not into it and later you want to read some books that have a higher like smut ratio. And that's totally fine. But I really don't think that we need to be judgmental about what people are reading and specifically what kinds of books that they're reading.
I would totally agree with that. So, yeah. Thank you for listening in today and joining us with our second very scientific theory. Next episode, we're going to be talking about the trilogy, which also now big series. What is it like a...
Yeah, so it's a trilogy, but she's also written so many books outside of it in the same universe. So I think there's like a second trilogy at this point, but I'd have to check. I haven't read the second one yet.
Yeah, I don't know the scientific term for it, but we're talking about the original trilogy of The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. We're pretty excited. This will be our first deep dive into more of a YA series. So I think that'll be kind of fun.
Yeah, we're super excited about this one.
So it should be great. If you like today's episode, you are in luck. We post every week on Monday. And if you need your fix throughout the week, you can follow us on TikTok and Instagram at the Bookyard Pod, or you can subscribe to us on YouTube and watch our fun little YouTube shorts at the Bookyard Pod.
Have a good week.
Bye.